I'll tell you a tale, not a legend, but a true story, or as true as any tale whispered down through time, half in fear, half in awe. They call it the story of the Greenbrier Ghost, and it's the only time in American history, at least officially, that a ghost helped solve its own murder. It began in the rugged hills of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, in the year 1897. A young woman named Zona Heaster Shue, just 23 years old, was found dead at the bottom of the staircase in her rural home. The one who discovered her wasn't her husband, Edward Trout Shue, but a neighbor boy Shue had sent to the house that morning on some errand. The boy found Zona lying stiff and still, her body strangely posed, eyes wide open, one hand clenched tightly. He ran for help. Now, Trout Shue was a local blacksmith, tall, strong, and a bit of a strange one. He'd married Zona only a few months before, and Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, had never trusted the man. She called him dark and shifty. Something about him had always struck her as wrong, even before he ever laid hands on her daughter. When the local doctor, George Knapp, arrived to examine the body, Trout had already washed and dressed Zona himself, which was highly unusual for that time, especially for a man. He had her in a high-necked, stiff-collared dress and had tied a veil around her head. When the doctor tried to examine her, Trout wept and moaned and clutched her so tightly the doctor couldn't get a good look. He made a few notes, felt around briefly, and, possibly unnerved by the widower's theatrics, he chalked Zona's death up to everlasting faint, and later, childbirth. There was no evidence of pregnancy, but no one pressed the matter. At the wake, Trout's behavior only grew stranger. He hovered over the coffin, adding a pillow and a rolled-up sheet beneath her head, claiming it made her more comfortable. He refused to let anyone get close, and those who did managed to notice that Zona's neck didn't seem quite right. Too loose, too mobile. But folks were reluctant to challenge the grieving husband. Mary Jane, though, she knew something was wrong. She took one of Zona's bedsheets home from the coffin, a small act of motherly love. But when she tried to wash it, the water in the basin turned red, then cleared, and the sheet itself turned pink, a color it refused to lose. Mary Jane took it as a sign. She began to pray, hard, and then the dreams came. Over the course of 4 nights, Mary Jane claimed that Zona's spirit came to her bedside, not in shadow or mist, but in vivid color and bright light. The ghost appeared with sorrow in her voice and fury in her eyes. She told her mother exactly what had happened, that Trout had murdered her in a fit of rage, strangling her until her neck broke, all because she hadn't cooked meat for his supper. Then, in one final act of ghostly proof, Zona turned her head completely around, facing backward. The mother woke screaming. Mary Jane, a stern and sober woman, wasn't one to be ruled by superstition. But she believed, no, she knew, that her daughter had come back for justice. She marched straight to the prosecutor, John Alfred Preston, and demanded her daughter's body be exhumed. Now, Preston was a lawyer, not a preacher. He didn't much care for ghost stories. But Zona's death had been strange enough, and the doctor's examination lazy enough, that he agreed to investigate. The body was dug up in late February, and what they found was no accident, no illness, no childbirth. Zona's neck had been broken clean through between the first and second vertebrae. Her windpipe was crushed. Her skin showed signs of finger-shaped bruises. There could be no doubt now. Zona had been murdered, Trout Shoe was arrested, and soon the whole town was whispering that Mary Jane's ghost had brought the truth to light. But it wasn't just whispers. At Trout's murder trial, the prosecutor tried to keep the ghost story quiet. He had enough physical evidence to make the case, but the defense, trying to portray Mary Jane as a delusional religious fanatic, called her to the stand and forced her to recount the ghost's visitations in front of the jury. She told it all, calm, steady, 4 nights, the message from her daughter, the backward-turning head, and she never once faltered. The courtroom, packed with locals who had grown up with mountain tales of spirits and signs, hung on every word. And something remarkable happened. Rather than discrediting her, the ghost story, combined with Trout's erratic behavior, the damning autopsy, and his shady past, 2 failed marriages, 1 wife mysteriously dead, convinced the jury. They deliberated just over an hour. Guilty. First-degree murder. Life in prison. He died in 1900, just 3 years into his sentence, from an unknown illness. Pneumonia, maybe. Measles. Or something worse, some say. Zona was laid to rest in a quiet grave in Greenbrier County. And years later, a state historical marker was erected near the spot. It reads, "Interred in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shoe. Her death in 1897 was presumed natural until her spirit appeared to her mother to describe how she was killed by her husband. Only known case in which testimony from ghost helped convict a murderer." Whether you believe Mary Jane truly saw a ghost, or that her dreams were just the sharpened instinct of a grieving mother who knew what the world refused to say out loud, it doesn't really matter, because in the end, justice came. And perhaps that was all Zona needed to finally rest. So, when the fire's low and the wind moves through the trees and you hear something creak that shouldn't, remember Zona. And remember her mother who listened when the dead spoke. Not every ghost story is fiction. Some are history,